Okay, hello. Welcome to the live stream for October 10th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it goes for about 3 hours. So if you are new here, welcome. If you are returning here, welcome. So before I forget, let me put in the comment area. I'm going to be in New Jersey this weekend. That's the location. I'll put it down in the video comment area after this video renders. So it'll probably be, I'll put the location information in probably early tomorrow morning before I leave. So if you'd like to come, if you're in New Jersey, if it's close by, if you'd like to come say hi, I would love to meet you guys. And it's going to be me and excuse me, Healthy Love that are going to be there. She has a fantastic art show that she's going to be hosting. So if you're not familiar with her work, you can find out more about it at wholeheartedarts.com. It's just going to be so cool. I'm really excited about it. Right, Pennsylvania. That's right. Sorry. I forget that those states around there are all so close together. That's kind of a new concept for me to think that way. So yes, it's actually technically in Pennsylvania, but I will be in New Jersey when I'm not in Pennsylvania. So yeah, I hope to see you there. And lots of people are hopping on. Hello, hello. Heather, Farah, E-Rock, Jacqueline, Kamami from France, bonsoir, Kelly, Blue Moon, Eileen, New Life, Grace, Nini. Let's see, Missouri Cowboy. Howdy, everyone, he says. And howdy to yourself, Missouri Cowboy. Or I should say, howdy right back at you. Speculator says howdy from Texas. Jackie from Holland. Oh my goodness. So before we get going, okay, Nini, go ahead and type in your question and I'm going to address a really fantastic comment that somebody left the other day that I thought was worth sharing. So this is from Laura, who says, the cool thing to know about empathy is that it requires you to experience in order to have it. Empathy is not compassion and it is not sympathy. Empathy is holding space with another and relating to whatever it may be that they are feeling because you have felt that too. So my point is, in a way, you earn this wonderful enlightened human superpower. You would not be able to empathize with someone in great pain if you had not felt great pain too. I just thought that was really beautifully worded and so accurate. And I think that is kind of the power on the other side of this is that it really does, it has the potential to make us much more empathetic and connected to just other people. And one of the biggest joys I have from this channel is I get goosebumps thinking about it. It just never gets old. It's just so cool to see people come together and support each other and yeah, just in support. And it's regardless of nationality, religion, what continents they're on. It's just such a unifying factor. And, you know, you find somebody else that's been through this and it's just this instant understanding of like, I see you, like I got you, you know? And it's just powerful. So, okay. So with that said, let me go back into the comments. Let's see, Demetria says, I was discarded in March. Why does the silent treatment hurt so much? Well, my guess is because it's just so incredibly invalidating. And it's, you know, it's a form of, interestingly enough, the silent treatment is a form of verbal abuse. Even though no words are used, it's the lack of communication. That's why it's considered abuse. It's punishing behavior. And it's designed to get and keep power and control over another person. And yes, it is incredibly painful. So I don't know of anybody that's ever had the silent treatment done to them that hasn't felt that way. I think it's one of the most soul shattering things that a person can do. It's so dismissive, and it's just saying, like, you don't exist to me, right? And it's incredibly painful. Like, if we've made this other person our whole world, especially, and we want things to work so much, and we've given and given and given, and this is how we get treated in return, it's just absolutely devastating. So yeah, the way you feel is very normal. Okay, let me see. Lovely Cat says, I wonder, do narcissists ever fear revenge from the people they have abused? That's a great question. My guess would be no. I think there's definitely a huge level of entitlement there for one person to be able to abuse another person. So they feel justified in their mistreatment of other people. In their mind, it's sort of like the old saying, with an abuser, it's the look what you made me do. That's the kind of mentality they tend to have. And so in their mind, they often feel like their reaction is, even though it might be extreme, they feel it might have been provoked. Well, I don't like you wearing makeup. I wouldn't have hit you had you not worn makeup. Or I told you to buy ketchup at the store. You forgot. That's why I yelled and screamed at you. So I think in their mind, it's just a very childlike mentality. They don't understand, like, there's no mature understanding of, like, containment. Of, you might be frustrated by this, you might not like it, but that, like, to lash out an abuse, physical or verbal or emotional, is just not okay. Like, that's the line. So I think there's, for them, I think there's definitely that attitude of entitlement. And then there's oftentimes this level of arrogance of that they won't get caught, or if they do get caught, that they'll get away with it. And I would be surprised if it they thought about consequences of their actions, really, for those two main reasons. Okay, let's go see Nini. Okay, let's see if she's typed out her question. I don't know if that's your real name or a nickname, but that is such a cute name. Okay. Yes, Julia, thank you. Nini, it looks like you're still in the middle of typing out your question. So, and then Farah's got a good one. So Julia, yes, thank you. I'm not going to show your info, but yes. Okay. So I checked my post office box today, and I actually laughed out loud when I got your letter. People in the post office were looking at me. So Julia sent me this letter today with $20. And let me just read it to you, because it just cracks me up. Well, she says, Dear Dana, thank you for all of your knowledge and your efforts. I hope this helps with the Egyptian licorice fund for the winter. That was the point where I began laughing out loud. And please let me know if you got this. God bless, Julia. Yes, I did get it, and it totally made my day. I loved how you worded that, and thank you. That $20 will go towards the Egyptian licorice tea fund. Let's see. And Rob, I think you were the one that had asked last week about the location of where I'm going to be. It's actually Pennsylvania. I was wrong, but not terribly far from New Jersey. I posted that in the chat at the very beginning. So if it was you, and if you didn't get the location, that's where it is. Okay. So let me, oh my gosh, you guys have such fantastic questions. Okay, so let me find out where I left off here. Okay, so Farah, thank you. This is a really valid point. She says, what about giving the silent treatment to cut out toxic people? So there's a difference between silent treatment and going no contact. Silent treatment it's the intention is different. So when a person gives silent treatment, it's designed to just shut down communication, to be punishing, to be a punishing behavior. It's where the abusive person is like, you know what, I'll reopen contact with you after I feel that you've learned your lesson, is basically the message that's being sent there with silent treatment. No contact is not designed to be punishing. It's designed to be self-protective. So no contact is like, you know what, I can't handle this anymore. If I try to be assertive, if I try to be solutions oriented, it doesn't solve anything. It just reopens the door for further abuse. And I just need to be done. So very big difference between the two, even though both involve silence, if that makes sense. But great question. Nini says, okay, most of the elders in my family are narcissists. My father and my stepmother are going through a divorce, and now they have once again banded to have myself, the scapegoat, be where they direct their ills. I live in the house they are fighting for. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. And invested my school money. And now I have bad credit that my father makes fun of constantly and refuses to care that I helped him and his wife with the mortgage as I lived out of the home. And now I'm in debt because of it. Is your name on the mortgage? I guess that'd be my first question. And my other comment to that would be, it sounds like it's time to take a few steps back, and to just never loan them money again. So I could see if you were living under their roof, if you were paying rent, these kinds of things. That makes sense. Okay, Nini says no. Okay, so your name's not on the mortgage. Okay, how much money, I guess, how did your bad credit get tangled up in this? And then how much money are we talking about? And she says, I am the only one that has been forced to give up money to them. $30,000. Over what period of time? Last Miranda asks, is there a specific topic for today? No, there's not. I hadn't really thought of anything. I would like to start opening with more of a topic on something positive, but we just kind of jumped right into it because I've been busy because I'm doing this trip, leaving tomorrow, and things have been chaotic. So we can talk about anything that you would like to talk about tonight. So feel free to just hop in and we'll go from there. Okay, so Nini says, I had them claim me while I was out of the home. I wasn't living there. Okay, so this money, this is $30,000 over a 4 to 5 year span of time that you were not living there. So you were giving them money for them to pay their mortgage, but you were not under the roof. And this put you in a financial bind. Am I understanding this correctly? Yes, okay. Oh boy, that's really, really difficult. I mean, I would say from here on out, I wouldn't give them any money. And the reason it sounds like they're going to you instead of your other siblings is because they know that they can get you to cave in and give it to them. So, and take care of their other children. She says, and I'm just in a bind. They're going to sell the home. Are they planning on giving you any money from the sale of the home? Probably not, but are they saying that they will? That kind of thing. You might want to go talk to an attorney, I guess, depending on like where you are in your relationship with them. It might be, if you're willing to just be like, we don't have much of a relationship, I paid all this money. The understanding was that they'd pay me back. Okay. She says, no, he informed me that he isn't planning on giving me any money. I would contact an attorney if this is the route you want to go. So I think you can go one of two ways. One, you either look at it as just tuition at the School of Hard Knocks, and you're like, okay, I see this stuff crystal clear now. I'm not going to give them any more money. I'm still going to have low contact with them. I might go over there for holidays and birthdays, that kind of thing, but never doing that again. I don't care. It's not your responsibility. And I would just make it very clear, like, I can't. Even if you get a wonderful job and you've got plenty of money, it's just, if a person's not going to respect you and they're not going to pay it back, then I wouldn't continue to give it out. So that would be one route you could take. The other route would be to contact an attorney and to see what's going on. You can potentially, depending on what the attorney says, see about filing a lien against the house. If there's any way that you can prove, if you could maybe expedite the process. I don't know the full process, but if you could, you would probably have to take them, depending on the state that you live in, whatever the small claims court maximum allotment is. If you can get some sort of court date, it might even be cheaper, even if the small claims maximum amount is, let's say, $10,000 in your state, it might still be cheaper to just file $14. It's very, very affordable to file a small claims court. You don't need an attorney to be there. Show all the paperwork, go to small claims. If you get a judgment against them, and this would be a question for an attorney, you could potentially see about filing a lien against the house. And then that way, when the house is sold, that money has to go to you. The title company will give you that money if the judge finds in your favor, if a lien is placed on the house. So that might be another avenue to explore. But like I said, you might want to talk to an attorney about that. But I am so sorry. That's just infuriating and painful and hurtful on so many different levels. And as far as the other financial bind that you're in, I would start prioritizing your debt from like lowest to highest and start calling those, if you have creditors, or I'm not sure kind of like what financial bind you're in, but I would, if you're late on other payments and it's starting to snowball, pretty much 10 out of 10 times, they will work with you. So if you can call them and just say, I'm coming up with a plan, like, I just wanted to keep you informed, and then just start making like minimum payments on things. So, yeah. And if it's, it's going to take a little while to turn your credit around, but, she says, I was brought back to the house without knowing that they wanted to sell the home so they can do this in my face while I'm at the house. They know that I've had it completely rough because they dried up my resources. Yeah. Yeah. If you're ready to kind of cut ties and just go your own way, I would recommend contacting an attorney. And most attorneys will have either some sort of like reduced initial cost or it's free. So if you can kind of gather up any documentation proving that you've given them this amount of money, like the time frames, the amounts, all of this. And then when you go into the attorney, letting him or her know this is what's going on. They're selling the house. Time is potentially of the essence. Is there any way that I can file some sort of claim against the house, or what would it take for me to file a lien against the house? She says, I've been trying to do something with my credit and it's getting up slowly, but that is not still going to do much since I have to find somewhere to be within just a few weeks. Yeah, that can for sure be a challenge. If you go to apply for an apartment or something like that, a lot of places will work with you. So if you let them know this is the deal, I'm normally good for it. I lent some family some money and they didn't repay me, and it's really put me in a bind. But I do have I have a job, and this is how I'm able to afford this place. And they might they might require that you pay like twice the deposit. Sometimes that can help, which I know is difficult if you're like, no, I just don't have any money. But, sometimes, and then I wouldn't recommend, this would be like a last ditch thing, but sometimes doing a cash advance off of a credit card. If push comes to shove, you're like, I need a place. I don't have any place. I have terrible credit. But if you do have some money available, I would just use that and just realize you got to do what you got to do. And then start working towards like shoveling down this debt after you get housing over your head. I don't know if you're familiar at all with the show, Dave Ramsey. He has a whole program called Financial Peace, and it's a really great show. You can find him on YouTube and these kinds of things. And I really like his whole kind of approach to money. And it's basically like, you've got to make yourself a priority. So food, clothing, shelter, those are your top priorities. Then paying off debt. Because a lot of times what happens is, for good, decent people, they're like, I really want to pay off I'm making my debt a priority, but it's to the extent where they're not eating 3 meals a day. They're not, their housing is at risk, these kinds of things. So I really like his approach of like getting the basics, the foundational pieces lined up and put in place, and then calling your creditors and just saying like, I want to work on this. I am working on this. And realize that you don't need to keep taking, if they're at the point where they're calling you, you don't need to keep taking their calls. Like, this stuff can go on, this can go on for a while. So get your basics figured out, and then get a plan. Start with the lowest debt first, build that momentum. So let's say if your lowest debt is $1,000, and your highest debt, let's say, is, I don't know, $20,000, your lowest debt, you just start shoveling, you're paying the minimum payments on everything, but you're shoveling money to get that low one paid off. And then once that one's next, it just builds momentum, and it helps to see momentum, to see things happening. And then once that debt's gone, then you go move up to the next lowest one. And then you just start shoveling money towards that, even if it's an extra $10 or $20 a month. Catherine asks, what is his name? Dave Ramsey. Okay. Let's see. Erica asks, can somebody please explain how Asperger's is different from covert narcissism? He told me he had Asperger's and has no empathy. He proceeded to blame me and silent treatment me when he spent time with his ex. Well, okay, for starters, a person can be both. But it sounds like he has some degree of like emotional, like Asperger's is more like the autism spectrum, and it's a range. So, and of course, not every two people are the same, but generally a lot of people with Asperger's they're not malicious, they're not conniving, they're not, if you're talking like a normal, decent person that has Asperger's, they might have some, they might like misread social cues. They might kind of have more of like a flattened level of emotion. Certain things they're just a little different when it comes to processing emotions and emotional cues and like social understandings, like these kinds of things. Some people are really high functioning and you would never guess. So, and some people you kind of, you're like, okay, yeah, you meet them right away and you're like, okay, something's a little different here. Like they stand too close, or there's kind of more of like a flat affect, like they're just not very responsive, these kinds of things. But the fact that he's, going back and forth with his ex, and he seems really emotionally insightful, and, these kinds of things, I don't know. Regardless of what he says he has or doesn't have, and regardless of what he is or isn't, I think it's always a warning sign when somebody tells you flat out they don't have empathy. So I don't think that there's too many people out there that would even tell you that they don't have empathy. So even people that are on the autism spectrum, it's been my experience that it's not that necessarily that they don't have empathy. It's that there's kind of emotional, it's just a different level of emotional awareness, I guess. But, um, like, I don't know. I guess in general, it's really difficult to have a relationship with a person who's telling you that they don't have empathy. They're doing silent treatment. They're blaming you. They're spending time with their ex, like all of that stuff right there. That's not workable. And let's see, Maya says, yes, some places don't do credit checks. Look for landlord or homeowner properties. Yeah, and if they do a credit check, I would also just be straight with them and just say, hey, I overextended myself trying to help family. It was a big mistake. I'm working on rectifying that. If you look up my credit report, you'll see I have a history of, solid payments. You'll see here is how I was financially before this happened. So, okay, let's see here. Nikki says she gets angry when she hears people compare Asperger's to narcissism. I agree. And, for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why there was that confusion there. But I think it's that more of that flat affect that some people have when they're kind of further up on the autism spectrum, that it's that they just seem almost unaware of their actions. And but the difference is it's not intentional. It's not designed to be hurtful. It's more of just a lack of awareness. If you were to bring it up, if you've ever met somebody that has Asperger's or is on the spectrum, and they do something that's considered rude or insensitive or whatever, and if you bring it to their attention, just like any other person, the vast majority of the time, they're going to be kind of taken aback, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I was doing that. And then they make it a point to not do that again. So, yeah, but there's not all that manipulation and abuse and that kind of stuff. Okay. Yeah. New Life says, my daughter has Asperger's and she does show some empathy. I mean, if they're high functioning enough to where they can drive and hold a job and date and, do all of that, then they have to have some sort of working degree of emotional intelligence. And so I definitely, if they are hurtful or what have you, I wouldn't let them off the hook by thinking they don't know. They've obviously got to have some degree of emotional awareness to be able to hold a job and to have exes and these kinds of things. Jeffrey says, yes, Asperger's is a form of autism. Thank you. That's a more accurate way to say that. Yes. And Catherine says, yeah, people with Asperger's have a very innocent energy. That's another great way to say that. Have a very innocent energy that narcissists don't possess. Yes. And Nikki says, anyone I know that has Asperger's are honestly the most genuine, honest people. Yes. I have a friend of mine. I'm pretty sure he has Asperger's. I would be surprised if he didn't. And it's interesting. He's very successful. He's very a computer guy, and he has an ex-girlfriend and he has a child. And it's very interesting listening to him talk about he's cultivating self-awareness and the way he describes things, because there's no filter with him. And some of the stuff, which I actually kind of appreciate, it's kind of this raw level of honesty that's just very, very rare. And sometimes it's kind of off-putting because it's oh my goodness, I cannot believe you just said that out loud. But it's interesting him having this almost like childlike innocence when it comes to certain topics. And so he'll tell me, Dana, I just realized that I really just like to have everything my way. And so he's kind of like, he's in therapy with his ex-girlfriend. They have this 10-year-old child together. And so all of these things are brought to his attention, but he's open to it. It's just stuff that never crossed his mind before. So like a narcissist wouldn't be that way. They would fight you tooth and nail. They would blame everybody else. There isn't that level of like introspection. Yes. And New Life says, and it is important that people know that it is possible to have Asperger's and to be a narcissist. I have experienced that firsthand. Yes, that's the thing. Like developmental disorders, there's like you have under kind of the umbrella of, cognitive impairment. Okay. You have developmental disorders, you have mental illness, and then you have personality disorders. I would say they're the three main ones. I guess the fourth one would be some sort of like neurological disorders. I guess you could say that neurological disorders, like a traumatic brain injury that might happen later on in life, or like Alzheimer's, these kinds of things. People, we're all very complex creatures, and different things can happen to a person at different stages of their life. So it's very possible that a person can have, a cognitive disorder, or like a developmental delay of some sort, or mental illness, or a personality disorder, or some sort of, cognitive issue. So this is why it goes back to us kind of figuring out, okay, like what do I want in my life? And this isn't to make the other person bad or wrong. It doesn't mean that we don't have compassion. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that you're being discerning about what you can handle and have in your inner circle. So just because a person, might have a bad childhood, or different issues might have happened to where now they have a personality disorder, or, they have some sort of mental illness that might not be able to be controlled. That doesn't mean that we need to take action out of like pity and be like, okay, come on into my inner circle, and then just cause chaos and havoc in here. But that's really difficult, I think, for a lot of us. Okay. And that's so true. Truth Seeker says, a lot of people with Asperger's or autism try so, it's going to make me cry. It's so true. Try so hard just to be treated with the same dignity and respect as what they refer to as neurotypicals. Yeah. Yeah, they sure do. And it's amazing. Like the things that we tend to just take for granted, how much of a struggle that is for other people. So, okay. Lolly, that's a cute name. Lolly says, I am late. Hopefully this isn't repetitive, but I often freeze in my emotions. And when I do feel, it hits days later. When I set boundaries, I feel like I'm selfish. I think you bring up two really great points. And, the first one being that you freeze in your emotions. And when you do feel those emotions, it can hit days later. I will tell you that it's been my experience, both personally and with other people in the group, even people, friends, that these conversations that we have, where it's very common for people to say, you know what, it's taken me decades to get in tune with certain emotions. So there is oftentimes, there can be this freeze response. Everybody has their own response to anxiety or distressful situations. And that can be a challenge when we're trying to be assertive or when we're trying to set boundaries. I'm a big fan of if you're aware that this is your kind of default defense, that you freeze and you're not even aware that I'm frustrated, I'm sad, I'm hurt, I'm angry. If you know this about yourself, like that's okay. Just kind of file that away. Like, okay, I realize this is just kind of how I am. To then take a few days. And then when you go back, when you kind of re-engage and you're trying to set boundaries, to take some time to try to get into tune with, I think, especially the emotions of like frustration or irritation. Those tend to be like the early warning signs of a boundary violation. And so when you do set boundaries, and a lot of this stuff, it really just takes practice. I still struggle with it. I don't set boundaries as much as I should. I have situations going on right now in my life that I'm like, you know what, I really need to address that. And I haven't. But at the same time, there's been other situations that have gone on that I was assertive with, and I did handle them. And I'm really proud of myself for that. So I think you just have to realize, like, it's kind of the whole progress, not perfection. And you do the best you can, and you just keep moving forward, and you just try to keep improving. I mean, that's all any of us can do. So, and maybe something else that you could try is if you set a boundary and, you're feeling selfish, or you realize that the boundary violation was maybe like a bigger deal than you thought, you can always go back and reopen up that conversation with somebody. But I think wouldn't you guys say that most of the time, like when you go to set boundaries, that at least at first you do tend to kind of feel selfish or like you're being difficult? That's probably nowadays more of how I feel. Like I'm just being difficult, but I will tell you, there's people in my life that I feel are just boundary ninjas. Like they are so good at just bringing stuff up right away. And it's just so nice. It's so nice to be around them because you never second guess where you stand. And I would much rather have somebody I don't like there's no, it's just nice to know where you stand with people and that you have that same understanding of like, hey, let's just bring this up. Like if we're feeling frustrated, if we're feeling disappointed, if I hurt somebody's feelings, like whatever happened, like, let's just talk about it. Let's just smooth it out, let's address it and let's make sure for it to not happen again. So I know it feels selfish. I guess the point is, I know it feels selfish at first, but if you can if you can start doing it more and more, I think you'll find that it's going to kind of push away people that are not meant to be in like this next chapter in your life. And it's going to attract kind of the next wave of people that are more your people, that are into that kind of assertive communication. I have found I've got some family members who the communication in my family with certain people is just, it just blows me away. The stuff that goes left unsaid, the silence is so heavy in the room. And, and they'll kind of look at you like, like, what are you doing? I can't believe that you're just talking about this so openly or whatever. But I think in some ways, when we can be that like force of change, it sets the tone. And they realize like, if she has an issue, she's going to bring it up, and she's going to bring it up in a tactful, assertive, solutions oriented way. And I think in some ways it can really like, it just clears the air, and then they realize that they can be that way too. So I don't know. It's a process. Okay. Jeffrey says, yes, communication is the key to a healthy relationship. Yes, it really is. We were talking about this the other day about conflict, and it's conflict in any dynamic. When you have two people that are being their authentic selves, is going to happen, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. because we're not going to see eye to eye with another person all of the time. It's how that conflict is resolved that makes all the difference. And so when conflict comes up between like, two solutions oriented, team oriented people, it can be discussed, and then it's just released, and then it's done. It's just a non-issue. So, yeah, it's just such an easier way to go through life. Okay, let's see here. Gareth, we're talking about damage to the frontal lobes of people's brains, and serial killers, and damage to the frontal lobes of their brains, and these kinds of things. Do you remember there was a wrestler, I want to say Chris Benoit, this was a handful of years ago, who upped and like murdered his wife and children. I'm not sure. Horrific. And he was a wrestler, a professional wrestler, and had a series of concussions. And I think he had been seeking help for quite a while, if I remember the story correctly. Oh, and then I think he ended up killing himself after that. I'd have to go look. But yeah, there's, when a person had traumatic brain injuries, which is what a concussion is, if they are repeated like that, it can cause a traumatic brain injury. And traumatic brain injuries can cause massive personality changes in a person. It's wild to see this. So, and they go from 0 to 10 if certain areas are damaged. I used to, I think told you guys this story a long time ago. 20 years ago, I used to work in a group home, and one of the guys there was he was a big guy. He was a former football player at Notre Dame, on a scholarship, and really talented guy. He'd gotten in a really bad car accident and was in a wheelchair. His brain injury was really interesting. He couldn't speak, but he could sing. And his memory, I don't think he had any short-term memory, and his long-term memory seemed to just stem from like before the accident. But he was so volatile that you had to stay away, like a good 3 feet grabbing distance away from him, because he could go from watching TV and being happy and in a good mood to you would accidentally startle him, or something would happen that he didn't like, and he would just start rocking back and forth. And he had one strong arm, and he would reach out and grab you. And many of us had clothing that was torn, hair that was like pulled hard. And he was just it was his brain injury, So yeah, it's really wild to see. It's tragic to see that with people. Okay. Let me see. Let me scroll down here. Oh, very cool, Fallon. We have a lot of really cool names on tonight. Fallon says, I got off work in time for this live stream. I started a new job this week that I'm loving. Another step forward on this healing journey, but a ways to go. Thankful I'm with you all. Very cool. Well, congratulations. That is a huge step. JJ says, I can never bring up the elephant in the room, no matter how tactful. Sometimes that's the dynamic when the denial or the rage ensues, yet they can dish it out like no tomorrow. Yeah, it's difficult, but I think it's one of those things that just takes practice. And sometimes maybe the first step in practicing that is just bringing some space, like giving yourself, because when conflict like that's really extreme tends to flare up, it can knock a person off balance emotionally. And so excusing yourself to go to the bathroom, is a great one, just to give yourself some time to just breathe, wash your hands, splash some cold water on your face, just kind of get recentered and then see how you want to approach it. And it's difficult to be assertive and to set boundaries with people that are not interested in seeking a solution, right? Like if their whole thing is they want to get their way and they don't care who they hurt or what kind of chaos and conflict they need to stir up to do that, then I'm a big fan of like kind of the whole situational awareness. Like if this is what you're dealing with, then the boundary might need to be that you leave. And just realize like this is a no-win situation. Like they're not seeking a solution. They're not seeking to work as part of a team. They're just seeking to get their way. And then getting clear with yourself of like, how much time do I want to dedicate to this? Like this is just kind of, it's the whole throwing your pearls to swine kind of a thing. Yes, Camilla asks, Dana, are you still doing the art show meetup in New Hope this Friday and Saturday? Yes, I am. I am headed out the door tomorrow, probably around 9 a.m. So I will be in New Jersey. I don't know. I don't drive very fast. So I'll probably be there in like 10 or 11 hours. I just kind of mosey over. So but yes, and then we'll have the show Friday and Saturday. So let me post the address again. For those who are within driving distance that would like to see Healthy Loves art, and you would be able to meet both of us if that is even something that you'd want to do. But I hope so. It would be great. It would be really great to put a face to a name. Yes, Camilla says yes, and Healthy Love will be there too. Yes, absolutely. That's a really great point. Oh my goodness. And that is quite the name that I'm going to completely mispronounce. So I apologize. I'm just going to say Mio. So I apologize ahead of time. Mio says, silent treatment brings up separation anxiety and triggers abandonment trauma. That's the hard thing, which is why they do what they do. That's hard thing, which they use to do. So yes, the silent treatment, I think for so many of us, if abandonment issues are an interesting thing, we might not even realize that we have them. But if we're feeling like we're in a scramble to keep a relationship together, and granted, a relationship with an emotional manipulator like this, I really feel that even if a person, I think anybody can just be slowly kind of manipulated into one. You have to be really grounded in yourself in order to see this stuff for, as it builds. I think so many normal, decent people just tend to give the other person the benefit of the doubt. They gloss over it. They see the good in them. They justify it, especially if it's like a slow descent. So it's just hard for anybody to see it. But if a person, and then when it starts going really hot, cold, up, down, this kind of stuff, and this whole intermittent reinforcement and then the trauma bonds and everything else, that can lead a person into just this scrambled, panicked feeling of, I love you, don't leave me kind of thing, because there's just always this level of intensity. So, and that's really difficult. But the abandonment component. So if a person does struggle with some abandonment issues, and in some ways, I think that you can tell is if you do have this pattern of really keeping any and all relationships together. And if your whole way of going through life has been like, okay, I'm in a relationship, I'm just going to hang on to it until I can't hang on anymore, then there's probably something deeper there to look at. So, and I think too, sometimes it can just be the awareness of, oh my goodness, I didn't realize, I thought I had totally dealt with the fact, with whatever it might be, that my father was never there, or that my mother was never there, or that my parents divorced, or I didn't realize how significant these events were on my life, or I thought I dealt with them. And then you realize, oh my goodness, no, I had been seeking out, if it depends on where the pattern is. Like if there's been this pattern, I think, especially with dating, where you're like, oh my goodness, I was craving stability so much in my life. And if I attached to somebody, I attached really deep, really fast. And it was absolutely devastating if we broke up, even if I'd only been dating them a week or two. So, you know, yeah, it's just very eye-opening. And it can really change the way I think that people approach different dynamics. I know for me, it's caused me to go a lot slower with getting to know people, because I realize I've suffered a lot of loss in my life. And I've had my trust violated so many different times, and I'm just tired. I'm tired of being hurt. And so I just go really slow with getting to know people. And one of my more recent realizations was that I was very quick to, if there was any conflict, like the old me would have been in this scramble to try to make the relationship or friendship or whatever it was work, like a desperate, frenzied scramble. Like, tell me what I need to do. Tell me who I need to become. Like, I'll do anything to make this work. That was the old me, especially like high school, early 20s. The new me, and I would say it's just been in the past, well, probably since Jack. So like, I don't know, however long ago that was, 7 to 10 years ago, that dynamic, I have been very quick to, if there's conflict or if I feel like they're going to leave me, I am the one that leaves first, kind of a thing. And talk about not being in tune with your emotions. Like, I didn't realize how a lot of the different emotions that I just wasn't allowing myself to feel. Like loneliness was a big one. Just being hurt, just having hurt feelings. Like, I was just quick to cut bait and just be like, I'm done. Bye, kind of a thing. And yeah, so I don't know. I guess the point is it's finding your sea legs with all of this. It just takes time and practice. And, when we know different, we can do different, kind of a thing. Kiara says, Dana, I find myself irrationally fearing gang ups and smear campaigns because in the past, when I've set boundaries or defended myself, I've been attacked much harder, and I almost feel like silence is safer. And yes, that makes total sense to me. And I guess, here's the thing is, it's the whole, like, when you're around like your people, then setting boundaries, it makes the relationship, like, setting boundaries makes the relationship stronger, and conflict, when it's resolved, also makes the relationship stronger. Because it's sort of like, oh my goodness, it's just, you clear the air. It's like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for bringing this up to me. And it's just so much easier. When you try to set boundaries around people that are not solutions or team oriented, yes, makes total sense, because they're either manipulative, or they're not able to bring their authentic self to the table. So I've experienced this one a lot, where you might bring something up, but if the other person's not comfortable with conflict, most people, I think in general, unless they're like really an aggressive personality type, most people are not comfortable with conflict. And we haven't ever really been taught how to deal with it effectively. And so when it does come up, if you do change the dance and you are being assertive about it, it can be really common for the other person to not know how to handle that. And so they might smile and nod and be like, oh, but no, totally, it was no big deal. That's totally fine. And they're just trying to smooth things over, not because it's okay with them, but because they have a lot of anxiety with this conflict coming up. And so then what do they go do? Then they go start going gossiping to people, potentially leading to a smear campaign. It's that stirring the pot kind of stuff. So I can see why you would feel that way. I think it's a legitimate concern. And this is why I think it's helpful just to go slow when you're kind of meeting new people and with friendships and these kinds of things, and just continuing to address it. Like if they do start gossiping about you or what have you, if only if they're solutions oriented. If you're getting the vibe of the smear campaign, it was more of them venting and they were gossiping, and they weren't necessarily trying to create like a smear campaign. They just weren't comfortable with assertive communication. It's not okay either way you dice it. But the smear campaign with a pathological person is them spinning reality, making themselves into the victim, like, and just trying to tear everybody else down and poisoning people against you. So, and Mio says, neglect is a form of rejection and also abandonment. Anxious, preoccupied attachment styles can be fixed, but not narcissists. Yes. That you really know your stuff. You are just spot on. There's just so much to this, right? Like, and here we are. We're like, I didn't want to have to learn about all of this. I was just trying to have a relationship, right? Like I was just trying to find a person that I was attracted to and we could hang out and do things. Like, how did I get here? Well, we're talking about like attachment styles and empathy and like all of this stuff. Like, it's just so wild. But the cool part of this is it just truly is like this never ending journey to personal growth. And I think most people, even if they're personal growth oriented, you have to really be in a tremendous amount of consistent pain in order to continue to grow like this, to continue to seek out these kinds of things. I mean, most people, aren't going to curl up on a Saturday night with a book on attachment styles, right? Unless you're trying to really figure out what's going on, like abandonment issues and all of this stuff. So we have the opportunity and the potential to learn so much about ourselves. It's just such a game changer. Right. Erica says, I know, Dana, it's so messed up to learn about all this. I feel like I'm a psychotherapist. Omar says, who is Dana? Hi, I'm Dana. Hi. Welcome. Yeah, Nail says, none of us wanted any of this, Dana, that's for sure. Yeah. Truth Seeker says, I really wish there was a way to counter the smear campaign. I really do. I have never found one other than no contact. I think the last time I even remotely dealt with this was a work situation, and I ended up quitting the job because I went through, when I was in nursing school, there were a lot of nurse instructors there who were absolutely freaking horrible, sadistic, dramatic, awful, power hungry, incompetent. Like, I've just had nothing positive to say about them. Awful human beings that hopefully they made better nurses than they did instructors. But there was this whole saying with the nurses that there's like different types. You kind of have like the mommy in white or like the angel in white. And then you have like the nurse ratchet, just the mean nurse. And then you have the kind that eat their young. And the vast majority of my instructors were the kind that ate their young. Like, they were just absolutely horrid. And that program was so stressful. I promised myself when I got out of there, I'm like, I will never allow myself to be treated like that again, ever. It just was not worth my mental health. And I had a coworker who was a nurse. And I had worked with her for 3 years, and she'd been kind of hot and cold, but it was never extreme. It was always more like icy stares, or just I'd get like kind of like this cold, just icy vibe from her. And that lasted like the first month I worked together, and then we found some common ground. Then we actually became like, I would say friends. We went camping together. We did stuff together outside of work. We talked on the phone. We had a lot of common interests. And then I told her, she knew I had this website and that I was working on this. I told her I was writing a book. And then like on like the next Monday, everything changed and she began making my life a living hell. And I dealt with that for, I don't even remember. It might've been about a month before I was like, I can't do this. I was dreading going to work. I was crying all the time. I was so anxious and just walking on eggshells the whole time. And so I had pulled a coworker aside and had said, this is what's going on. Like, and she's like, oh yeah, she's like, I see this. And so I'm sure my other coworker talked all kinds of stuff. And so I would just tell people, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure she has said like all kinds of stuff. Realize what she's telling you. There's kernels of truth to that, but the way that she's behaving is unacceptable. And it was so funny because when I finally made the decision to quit my job, which I was not financially prepared to do, I just was like, I've got to get out of here. Like, this is triggering my PTSD. Like, you wouldn't believe. When I left there, and I went into her office and said, just want you to know I put my 2 weeks in. I think I waited a week actually before I even told them. And I'm like, okay, I've got a week left. And the day I told her, she did a total 180 and became, just because she knew, because that like I was out the door and there was no, like, she was going to lose a friend, basically. I think I was pretty much her only friend. And then she became super nice and like the normal person that I had known for a long time. So I know, it's just crazy. Okay. Charles asked, what's that little tool right next to these people's names? That means that they are a moderator for the group. So if chaos ensues, trolling ensues, they can delete comments and mute people and do all kinds of stuff. But good question. Cha-cha-cha. Yeah, Life Alchemist says, oh, Life Alchemistic. That's a cool name tonight. Says, that's awful. I'm so glad she didn't get in the way of your work. My goodness. We are all learning so much as a result of your perseverance. So thank you, first and foremost. But one of the ways, because I still have anger about that. I was actually thinking about it today. I still have so much anger about the whole situation, how she treated me, that even though I talk about this stuff, I teach this stuff, I talk about manipulation, I talk about this kind of stuff, that when I was in the middle of it, it was really difficult for me to figure out, is this me or is this her? And like, it really just rattled my confidence in my abilities kind of across the board. But I had to continue to kind of steer into, whenever I start feeling angry about that, I have to remind myself, I'm like, Dana, you would have continued to stay at that job until things got so bad that you couldn't hang on anymore. Like, that job was not for you. This was, in many ways, it was a blessing in disguise, because it needed to hurt this bad and be this like unbearable in order to get you to leave. And I just try to focus on that. Like, this is it's truly exactly what needed to happen. Like, because I would have stayed there for probably an extra year or two. And I wouldn't have been able to do everything that I'm doing now. So, and who knows, maybe everything that I'm doing now would have fizzled out, because I was really getting to a point of like sheer exhaustion, just emotional exhaustion from doing this every chance I got, to then working as a psychiatric nurse. It was just a lot. It was, 18 hours a day of mental health issues, and it was just too much. So I try to calm myself down and just remind myself this is exactly what needed to happen. Last Miranda says, how do you deal with that anger from that time? Well, I think I just kind of covered that, but I guess in general, for me, like with anger from these different situations, it's more, I feel like if I can put that anger to good use, if I can kind of channel it into something positive and use it for rocket fuel, whether that means, and not even just anger, like I think any type of traumatic situation, if I can transmute it into making it somehow work for me or work for somebody else, then I'm able to squeeze out everything that I can from that experience. And that really helps to diffuse the anger. So, and it's difficult. It is so difficult to try to squeeze out, to make a really tough situation like that work for you. It really is. It can almost feel like you're re-victimizing yourself. But I have just personally found that it's rarely this, it's rarely the situation. It's rarely what happens to us that's causing us all of the pain. It's our perceptions of what happens to us, you know, and oftentimes that pain and that hurt and all of that, it's righteous pain. It's understandable. It's appropriate. And in time, as we move forward in healing, I think a big part of what helps that healing is to give a more empowered, like, perspective to what happened, and just to try to make some sort of positive meaning come from that. Not that we should somehow thank them for that. You know what I mean? Like, I would never thank my coworker for being an absolute nightmare. If any positive meaning that happens from an event, it's because I did that. Like, that was my, my work that I did on that. So it's, I'm very clear, like, on just trying to make things work for my highest and greatest good, or for the highest and greatest good of other people. And when you do that, then everything in life is just an opportunity for growth. But like I said, when a person's fresh out of a really painful situation, and some situations are absolutely horrible, right? Like, I would never tell this I would never encourage somebody to have this understanding when they're raw with emotion. So please just understand that. Like, I think down the road, when a person's kind of been able to, you work through a lot of the emotions, and you're trying to reassemble your life, like your physical life and your emotional life, and you're trying to just to move forward in an empowered way. I think coming up with an empowered meaning of things can be really helpful. Sort of like what we were talking about earlier with Nini and her situation with money. And there are times in life where we might get tangled up in like a bad business deal. We might loan money to people. It's devastating. Her situation, it's family. And that money is gone. And now we're in a real difficult bind. And my goodness, I could write volumes of books on, mistakes I've made, or just rotten things that have happened. And it's helped me. The money that I've lost over the years, I really truly look at it as that was tuition at the school of hard knocks. And frankly, a lot of the time, that's been some money that's been well spent. If you can learn the lessons from that, I have taken so many college classes that have cost me thousands of dollars that I've learned next to nothing in. So sometimes it's those really painful experiences that you're like, okay, yeah, that cost quite a chunk, but you know what? I'm going to squeeze everything I possibly can out of this and learn these lessons and not repeat them. And you might, my goodness. And if you can do that with every painful experience, it's really wild how you might come across an experience later on down the road. And you might look at that and be like, my goodness, I'm so fortunate that I learned this lesson, this really painful lesson. If I hadn't have learned it then, I would have lost 6 times the amount of money in this other thing that came up, So it can be really painful in the moment, but sometimes, It's lessons I think we all just need to learn. Charles asks, do you think it's okay if I don't care about narcissism? And is it bad? No, I don't see a problem with that at all. I think, I think a big part of this channel is about us. It's about boundaries and standards and deal breakers and putting our lives back together. And, but yeah, people pop in here all the time for a wide variety of reasons. Sometimes they're just bored. Sometimes they're curious. Sometimes they're trolling, but whatever it is, as long as you're not a troll, you are more than welcome here. Semper Grove says, hi, Dana. I'm just tuning in. Sorry, I'm a bit off topic, but can you share some tips on overcoming learned helplessness and self-shaming? I struggle with that a lot at my teaching job. So a sense of learned helplessness. There's two types of what's called locus of control. So where we place our control. We can have an external locus of control, or we can have an internal locus of control. And this is such a game changer. So most people aren't aware of what kind of locus of control they have, because my goodness, who goes around thinking about stuff like this, right? So if a person has an external locus of control, they don't feel in control of their lives. It's the mindset of things are happening to me. And so we might feel like a perpetual victim because we're not aware that we're not aware of the control that we do have over our lives. And a lot of that control comes with the ability to say no and to walk away from that which does not serve us. So I think you can see where I'm going with this. Like, it's a really powerful thing. If a person places all of their control outside of themselves, then that's a problem. And so when we shift and we start taking that appropriate level of control, we start learning how to be assertive, we start saying no, we realize that our wants and needs and thoughts and feelings and opinions matter just as much as anybody else's, and that it's our life, and that you're going to start making yourself a priority in your life, then things radically begin to change. Because again, like, let me give you some example. Like old me, okay, the old me, because I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to effectively set boundaries or to be assertive. I found myself in all kinds, and I didn't know how to keep myself safe because of that. So, I guess the ironic thing is I felt like I did have, I did have pretty good boundaries, and that but they weren't pushed. I guess they weren't pushed that often, or like they weren't pushed in such a way that was really problematic. So like we were talking about earlier about, you might have coworkers that have the gossip and people are, talking about it. They're just, you have a teacher's lounge or a nurse's lounge or whatever it might be. And people just gossip and, nothing's getting resolved. They're just venting all the time. That would have been the old me. And perpetually, because when people have that external locus of control, if they're not able to be assertive, if they're not able to tell their boss or spouse or children or whoever, like, if you're not feeling like you're able to be heard and to affect change in your own life, then all it leaves you with is feeling frustrated. And that frustration's got to go somewhere. And so then it just goes into gossiping and like quote unquote venting, but it doesn't go into action that affects any type of change. So it just leads and then you have all kinds of like other issues, right? People start gaining weight, they start losing weight. They they just become perpetually like really angry. They become passive aggressive, like all kinds of things, because they just don't know how to be assertive. So reclaiming your power and control, making decisions for you, getting grounded enough in yourself to where other people can disagree with you, or they can give you their opinions about your life, but you're still able to make up your own mind at the end of the day. You're not thinking that other people have all of the answers for you. Because advice is worth the 2 cents that's given, right? Like, so you've got to be able to, if you're going through life, everybody's going to have opinions, and to be able to be grounded enough to figure out what's right for you. It's truly finding your own North Star and then moving in that direction, because there's no shortage of well-intended bad advice out there. At the end of the day, you're the only one that knows that, like, the fuller context and can actually decide what's right for you. So struggling with like overcoming learned helplessness, a lot of that just goes back to starting to really think about boundaries, standards, and deal breakers, and how to be assertive. I think it just starts with bringing space. Like I said, if there's some sort of conflict or something happens, either journaling about it, taking a time out, interrupting your pattern of how you might have just you've been going with the flow. A lot of people that don't like conflict just go with the flow in order to get along because they don't like conflict. The more you build up, it's like a muscle. The more you build up like the assertiveness and the boundary skills, the stronger they become and the easier it gets. So that's a big part of it, a really important and amazing game-changing shift. So that's the learned helplessness component of it. And if I didn't cover any points on that, please let me know. The self-shaming, I think the antidote to that is self-compassion, and just realizing that none of us have it all figured out. Okay. This is the journey of life, and life is continually about challenges. It's about these aha moments about who you are as a person. And because we're different people in different chapters of our life. Like if we're growing at all, then you would be very different than you were in high school. If you're still the exact same person, I would be a little bit concerned by that. So, just cultivating this new level of awareness. And I think anytime that there's that new level of awareness, especially if we're coming from a place of that learned helplessness, and we realize, oh my goodness, I've had a long string of really problematic people in my life. And a lot of this could have been handled very differently had I learned how to keep myself safe and been in tune with my instincts and how to be assertive and all of this stuff. My life could be very different. That definitely can contribute to feelings of shame and regret and sadness and all of that. And that's, these are feelings that I struggle with too. So they're there. And I just try to remind myself, like, I did the best I could at the time with what I knew. And now that I know different, I do different. It's just a journey. It's just a journey. And we do the best we can. Okay. Abuse Free says, hi, Dana. I've been out of abusive relationships for almost 3 years. I am hurt almost every day from people's behavior whenever I stand up for myself and set boundaries. Is that a normal part of behavior or normal part of recovery? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? You're hurt almost every day from people's behavior whenever I stand up for myself and set boundaries. I guess what's going on when you stand up for yourself that's hurting your feelings? Okay, Lolly's taken off. Okay, good night, Lolly. Okay, good. Semper Grove says, that is amazing. Thank you so much. Awesome. I'm so glad that helped. Oh, there's just no shortage of aha moments that we can squeeze out of all of this. Bella asks, how do I contact Dana? I will give you my email, but I will say I'm having it. I don't know. My email has been a mess for a very long time, and certain messages get through, certain messages don't. I have no idea why. It's on my list of things to address, but you can try to email me at dana@thriveafterabuse.com. I'm also in my Facebook group pretty much every day. That Facebook group is called Thrive After Abuse. And, so if you're interested in joining a group like that, just kind of a heads up. There's also the Facebook page. The page is open, the group is closed. So I am actually going to be working towards hopefully getting some people on to help me with all of this. I've been really overwhelmed with all of this, like the technology of it all, with videos and just all of this. So I apologize, you guys, if you've been sending me emails, if you've been trying to reach out. It's just been a hot mess, and when I get overwhelmed, I absolutely just shut down, and of course that just makes things worse. So it's not that I don't care; it's that I just have been absolutely overwhelmed with things for a very long time, and it's one of the things that's on Healthy Love and I's to-do list when I get up to New Jersey, to kind of at least discuss this and figure out if we can move forward. So, okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm scrolling. Postmodern says Dana needs a secretary. Yes. Or administrative assistant. I need somebody. And I think here's the challenge though, is obviously this information there's a first and foremost, like a huge privacy concern. So it can't just be anybody that I let see my emails. That's been, I think, one of the biggest blocks from me really hiring somebody to help out. And then, I need to have somebody that is able to effectively handle and organize a high volume of emails and multiple emails. So they need to be, well-intended, ideally familiar with this topic, like solid, good people, and able to get they need to be more organized than I am, which at this point in the game is not saying a whole lot, but they really need to be able to teach me how to get all of this organized so this doesn't happen again. Okay, let's see here. I'm scrolling up. Oh, that's very insightful. Yeah. Last Miranda says, she says, I have the same issue. The pain comes from us wanting them to validate our perspective, but this won't happen usually. And if we let go of that need for their approval, the pain vanishes. Yes. So something interesting too that I've also noticed about this is I found that the whole kind of stemming back to those abandonment issues, that validation also goes very hand in hand with that. And so for me, just bringing that to my awareness of, oh my goodness, like this is not real. Like this is all these like residual emotions from stuff that happened in the past that I'm bringing to the present moment. And what am I doing? Like, I don't need validation from them. Like, this is ridiculous. And it was just sort of like in an instant, I was able to just detach and just be like, done. So it's still painful, don't get me wrong, but it helped to set me free, I guess is what I'm saying. Josie said something about, she heard a video that said unconditional love can cure a narcissist. No, that's not true at all. when a person has some sort of like deep emotional wound, like love doesn't fix that. So they need to be able to do the work, to examine it, to be in tune enough, to be introspective enough to be able to handle their own feelings, to work through those abandonment issues, to work through those insecurities. And this is what I was saying earlier. Like a lot of people, who wants to do this, right? Like it's painful work, and it's brick by brick that you're having to examine and figure out how all of these pieces fit together. And it's time consuming, it's exhausting, it's emotionally draining. And we are highly motivated to do that work. Just like somebody, okay, think about this way. Somebody else's love isn't going to fix you. It's not, it's an ingredient, like it's helpful to have to be supported and loved, but it's not the only thing. Just like unconditional love doesn't cure anorexia or alcoholism or diabetes or morbid obesity or anything else. Like a person's, I wish it worked that way, but it doesn't. A person's got to be able to do their own stuff. And especially if they're an adult and they've been doing, like, there's kind of this theory on, if there's been these wounds in like childhood, right? And the child is still a child, and they're acting out, they're, having a lot of like anger issues, this kind of stuff. The earlier this stuff can be addressed, the better chance there is that they won't end up developing a personality disorder because of it. But it's very much like, but even then, that's really hit or miss. And I don't even know how effective that is. It's just really difficult to get through to other people. And children have their own set of challenges because there's kind of, like if they have an abusive parent at home, like, they're stuck. Like, so there's only so much you can do with children. And it's even less as they're an adult. It's sort of like if you imagine if you were like to plant a tree and a big storm comes along and it's going to knock the tree over, right? And nothing is done to correct the growth of that tree. Well, fast forward out 3 years or 30 years, and that tree now grows in a different shape, right? And it is like we can try to straighten it out, but there's kind of this window of time where after that time, like that personality is pretty much formed. And and especially if a person's not like, so I think realize for a lot of us, right? Like, again, we're highly motivated to make our lives work. If you think about how difficult it is, brick by brick, having to have these aha moments and then going through all of this stuff, and we have this driving obsessive curiosity trying to make our lives work, how long that takes, and practicing. We're talking about setting boundaries. We're talking about being self-protective. This is one of the most basic human drives out there, is to keep ourselves safe. And so, like, if you can think about how much practice we need at learning this stuff. Now think about a narcissist who is not sincerely, well, I would say if they're a true narcissist, they're not sincerely aware that they have a problem. They don't care if they have a problem, even if somebody says that they have a problem. They're not introspective. They have the emotional maturity of a 3-year-old. Like, there's no driving force there for them to do anything different because they always get their way. But it's sort of like a spoiled child. Like, to other people, they're like, oh, it's so nice that they always get their way. There's no personal growth there. There's nothing there. There's just a shell of a person. It's a damaged child in an adult body. It's tragic when you can see it that way, but our love doesn't do anything, Okay, let's see here. That's a great comment. Mio says validation can be a tool to shut down that hard inner critic. Yes. I'm a big fan too of like affirmations, and I don't think healing obviously, is any one thing. I think it's a multifaceted approach. And the more tools you have, the more skilled a person can become. So I'm a big fan of feeding your brain. So changing that self-talk. We were talking about like learned helplessness and shame and everything earlier. Feeding your brain positive things, changing the way that you think about yourself, the things that you believe about yourself, and using I am statements. Like I am a lifelong learner. I am capable. I am a good friend. I am dedicated to healing. I am strong. I am brave. I am powerful. I am compassionate. I am intelligent. You know what I mean? And so you're writing, ideally writing these things down on like maybe note cards. And if you can come up with dozens more, by all means, go for it. And then going through them and really getting to the point where you're believing that about yourself, like that there's a lot right about you. And so finding that whatever it is that's right about you, like I am creative, I am a powerhouse, I am a good person, I am, like I am a force for good, I am a good friend. Find the things that are right about you. It really does go a long ways. And then the validation component too, of just, yes, reminding yourself like that there's a lot that's right about you, that you did the best you could with any situation. Like if you did the best you could at the time, that's all that anybody can ask for. Okay, let's see. Oh, thanks, Heather. She says, we appreciate you. Thanks for all your guidance, encouragement, and knowledge. Well, thank you very much for your kind words. Tanitra says, I am strong. Yeah, it's powerful, right? When you start, and then if you can go through your life and you start finding, like you prove it to yourself, you start realizing, like looking back on different events, proving yourself right about these things. Like, you know what? I am really strong. I left a relationship. I was dragged through hell and I got out of that. And I'm still here and I still get up and I still go to work and I'm here. Like I am still here. I am strong. And just this acknowledging there's so many things. We might not have done everything right. Nobody does, but there's a lot that's right about you. There really, truly is. And Jennifer says, it's one thing to say these things to yourself, but how do you believe them if your self-esteem has been damaged for so long? Well, so just like I was saying, like you're finding different references. The beliefs that you have are just the thoughts that you keep thinking. So if you want to change your beliefs, it's changing your thinking. And if you want to change your thinking, it helps to find different references, different points of understanding. So it's just like learning to think differently about anything. So if you can start finding ways that you are competent. You know what? I don't know. I had a project for work and I turned that in 2 days early and it was, it was a great project. Or my one of a lifelong learner is like I'm going through this, I really want to get into writing more books and it's been a learning curve. I'm not even going to say like, I hope my writing will become better over time because I'm dedicated to learning about it. And I just found a really great editor today that I'm super excited about. And I really believe that that's going to help me become a much stronger writer. And so, but telling myself, because I would be lying to myself if I was like, I am an amazing writer, right? Like that would be really stretching it. Like, hopefully someday I can really get to, I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable saying I'm an amazing writer. I like a more growth oriented mindset anyhow. But I tell myself, I'm like, Dana, you are a lifelong learner, like you are so determined, and you might not know everything that you need to know right now, but you're going to get there. Like, you're going to find other people that have these answers, and you're just going to squeeze as much knowledge as you can out of them. And then you're just going to keep moving forward. I am growth oriented. I am capable. I am dedicated. I am strong. These things. And so you're finding, so even in those moments where you're like, I don't know how capable I feel, like I'm struggling with kind of learning this new skill, and it can be really difficult, especially when you're here, when you get criticism or whatnot, but just reminding yourself, like, finding affirmations that I think are comfortable for where you're at, I guess is what I'm saying. Does that make sense, Jennifer? Let's see, somebody asked, do mixed signals lead to cognitive dissonance? Yes. So cognitive dissonance, it's a fancy way of saying mental distress. And it's something that we all experience on a fairly regular basis. And the reason that we have that mental distress is when we have two conflicting thoughts about the same thing at the same time. So, for example, if a person is trying to quit smoking, on one hand, they have the thought of cigarettes cause cancer. But then on the other hand, they have the thought of cigarettes are really relaxing. Now they're like, I really want a cigarette, but I don't want a cigarette. I need to quit. And they're just waffling back and forth. That's the feeling of cognitive dissonance. And so it's the two conflicting thoughts at the same time as they pertain to an action. So if my action is going to be, I'm going to go ahead and have that cigarette, I have to find the thought that's in line with that. So I might tell myself something like, it's just one cigarette. Or, you just start justifying. That's how that happens, is we start justifying things to smooth out that mental anguish that we're experiencing. So, and it feels like mental anguish. It feels like confusion, because it is. And it leads to justifications. Kiara says, Dana, I feel like I failed myself and I've allowed myself to be taken advantage of and abused. I feel like part of me craves validation from abusers and toxic people, and other parts of me just want safety. Well, I would say, for starters, that's incredibly insightful of you to have this realization. And I think this is a very common way to feel when a person is moving forward into healing. So yes, there's definitely this point when we start realizing, oh my goodness, I have been going through life with this external locus of control. I have been giving my power away right and left, and I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. I thought I was just going with the flow. I thought I was just like, being a peacekeeper. I didn't realize that this was going on or how much of a problem it was. I didn't know how to handle uncomfortable situations or deal with conflict or stress or anxiety. And now we're so much more aware of our power, and that you can walk, like, you don't need to wait until things get really bad in order to walk away. Like, you can walk away much sooner. Like, these are some really harsh, they're game-changing realizations, but then the other side of that is they can be really hard realizations to have, because it's like, oh my, like, I totally get where you're coming from with this. And it is really difficult, and I think, okay, so then that just goes back to self-compassion. You did not allow yourself to be abused. I think the vast majority of people out there, this stuff is not taught. And they get caught up in this and they're not even aware. It's sort of like when a person gets involved in a cult. Like nobody thinks they're joining a cult. They think that they're just joining the really cool belief system, right? Like there's just this new spiritual group, or there's a spiritual teacher. Like nobody thinks that they're joining a cult. And it's the same thing with like getting involved with any type of manipulative person. Like nobody thinks that they're going to get involved in an abusive relationship. And until it's the same thing with the cult. Like until things get so bad that they're like, oh my God, I've got to get out of here. Like, what is going on? And now this cult leader is, sleeping with every single woman in here and child. And they want to marry off my 12-year-old daughter. Like, how did I, like, I just woke up from it, right? Like now I realize this is a problem. I'm not okay with this. I need to get out of here, kind of a thing. So it's the same with an abusive relationship of any kind. There's just that we justify, minimize, blame ourselves. Like it must be me, until things get so bad. Then we're like, oh my goodness, I've got to get out of here. And then boom, people have this realization that you're having. So, craving that validation from abusers and other toxic people, it can be hard to unlock horns from manipulative, problematic people like that. I think part of it is it's crazy making when you have a crazy maker in your life who is continually trying to make it seem like their, problematic behavior is your fault. And so a lot of people stay roped in because they're trying to just get the abusive person to acknowledge that they're not the problem. It's infuriating. And when anybody's kind of just pushing buttons and trying to get your goat, it's hard to walk away from that. We want it there. It feels like the injustice that it is of just being unfairly targeted. And it can be really difficult for a person to just walk away from this. And especially if this person's played a significant role in your life, it's hard. A lot of people, especially if the abuser or manipulator is family, it's hard. I think the death of that hope that things will change is something that takes decades, if it ever happens. And it's the whole Stockholm syndrome. You've got a child, we'll go with that example, a child in an abusive home. No matter how abusive that parent is, 9.999% of the time out of 10 times, that child is going to defend that parent. And they're going to want to go back, and they're going to think that, that anybody else that's trying to take them away is bad. And that child defends that parent. And then the abuse and the manipulation continues and continues and continues. But deep down, it's really difficult for us to acknowledge that we're caught up in the fantasy of who we need our parent to be, or who we hope they can become. That's a fantasy that it takes a long time to let go of. So wanting that validation is a big thing. And I think that comes from, it's more of like that child self of like, it's just that one, and it's understandable, like wanting to be validated by somebody that you care about. It's sort of like, well, if you don't see it, but this is the child mentality. And so if you can see like, this is not the adult you, this is kind of these unhealed childhood wounds. So the child in you is like, I really want this other person to validate me, because if they don't validate me, then I don't have worth. And that's part of that external locus of control, and that this kind of like external self-esteem that tends to go along with that. And it's that unhealed childhood wound of like, I don't exist unless other people validate me, and you're just looking to other people to tell you how to think and feel and act and all of this. I think that can be a really powerful realization. You're like, oh my goodness, okay, I can learn to validate myself. Like I can learn to think, to realize that my own thoughts and feelings and wants and needs matter just as much as anybody else's. And I can validate me. That's when your power really comes into play, when you can validate you. And other people can disagree with you and you'll be okay. Have you ever heard, there's a saying around Something like healthy self-esteem is not in thinking that other people are going to like you. It's in being okay if they don't. And I thought that was so appropriate because that's exactly what it is. 10% of the people out there are going to love you. The other 10%, nothing you ever do is going to be good enough. They're just not your people. They're not going to like you. And then 80% fall somewhere in the middle. And so it's just realizing, okay, I am just climbing up the wrong tree here, trying to get validation from that bottom 10% of people. Like they just don't, they're not my people. I'm not their people. They might just not have that to give. If they're pathological personalities, they don't have that to give in any meaningful, sincere way. Let's see. Yeah, True Seeker says it's just like mourning a death. And yeah, the person is still on this earth, but their ability to be healthy just wasn't there. Yeah, it's very eye-opening when we just fully realize that and I think too, it's mourning the death of the fantasy, and we just start to see things clearly. It's just such this huge realization, but it's just such a game changer. Okay. Kevin says that he had the feeling today that he's just not ready to be an adult yet. I think I really need to allow myself to nurture my inner child. Well, and I think that these two things more often than not coexist at the same time. But it is really insightful for you to have that realization of, you know what, there's still some stuff there. Like there's still some stuff that some nurturing. Here's the cool thing. When you bring your adult self to the table and you're aware of these kind of childhood wound stuff that pops up periodically, but when you're approaching these situations from an empowered adult perspective, it's this realization of, you know what, I can handle this. I can handle this. And so my inner child that was wounded by whatever the invalidation, the abuse, the neglect, the whatever it might have been, they were overwhelmed by everything that was going on because they truly were powerless. They were a child in the situation. All children look to their primary caregivers for that validation, which builds self-esteem and everything else. And so as an adult, you can see this through an adult set of eyes and just be like, you know what, but I'm an adult now and I can handle this and I can take care of this. I might not know how to handle this or take care of this, but I can figure it out. There's these resources I can utilize. I can reach out. These are the different ways that I can handle this and that I can protect that inner child within me. And it's, and that's such a great way to just nurture yourself and just to continually be like, you know what, you just like, kiddo, this is how I'm going to treat you. This is how I'm going to take care of you. It's powerful. Let's see. Catherine is talking about sexual behavior. She says, what kind of problematic red flag sexual behavior in people that are potentially dating that we can observe, like the age group of females they notice or any subtle disrespectful attitudes towards their female partners. Well, I think you kind of hit on two really big things. I would say it's concerning when there's hypersexuality in general involved. So there's kind of this, or that lack of, since there's a lack of intimacy there with sex. If it's, if a person's watching a lot of porn, if they're Going to a lot of, if it's kind of more of like this dehumanizing behavior, it's a lot of porn, it's a lot of strip clubs, like, that kind of stuff. If they're not, and I know that a lot of guys, a lot of people in general watch porn. I'm not even saying I have anything against porn. I'm just saying, like, if it's to such an extreme and their sexual behavior just lacks like that true connection there, then that's a concern. If they're noticing young girls, especially underage girls, that's a problem, a big problem. I would leave. Like, that's not even the stuff that's workable, and not something that's worthy of addressing. It's worth leaving, especially if you have a daughter. So, attitudes towards women, frankly, I think even like little things like calling women females, like, anything that's kind of just shows this level of like a lack of awareness of a woman's humanity, is a problem. Just kind of that detachment in general. Let's Be Real says hypersexuality is a symptom of CPTSD as well. Is it? That's interesting. I didn't know that, if that's the case. I think regardless of what a person has going on with them, if there's an inability to effectively bond with another person and there's not that level of intimacy there, it's a problem. Whether it's due to CPTSD or narcissism or alcoholism or, I mean, you name it, it's a problem. Like, being on the receiving end of, if a person's hypersexual to their partner, it feels like you're just a blow-up doll. It leaves a person feeling really kind of degraded and used. It's just an icky feeling, even if the sex is consensual. So, I don't know. I guess what all are you experiencing in what's going on in your relationship that's making you ask this? Jennifer says, I'm in my 30s and I still feel like a child. Even though I live by myself, I'm independent and I make my own way. I still am very dependent. Well, I would be curious to know if other people really feel like they are their age. And like what that really means to be 30 or 40 or 80 or whatever, I think I don't know, set me straight if I'm off in the bushes here, but I think a lot of people don't tend to feel their age. Like, we all have this idea of where we're supposed to be in life and like what 30 looks like, right? Or what a certain age looks like. And when we don't match up to that picture, it can be very kind of just disconcerting. So, I mean, if you are independent and you do make your own way and you live by yourself, then I would say you sound like you're on a pretty good path and you're in your 30s. So, but yeah, I think understanding like there's certain things that we might be dependent. Like I said, it's all a journey. Like, I don't know if anybody truly has it figured out. It might feel like other people do because we're on the outside looking in. And I think that's the benefit of having these open conversations. I think a lot of people walk around feeling inadequate and like everybody else has it all figured out except for them. And I guarantee, I think most people are dealing with stuff they never thought they'd be dealing with, or that they just don't feel equipped to deal with. I think shame and embarrassment are such common emotions for people, that's just not discussed. Okay, interesting. Let's Be Real says, well, at least for me, the sexual urges are more from loneliness and the CPTSD. Okay, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if she's still on here. Healthy Love. Let me see. I don't think she is, but let's talk about like hypersexuality in that context, because I do think thank you for bringing that up. I do think this is something that people struggle with. I just wasn't making the connection in my brain, but I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people, it is out of loneliness, or it's out of fear, or it's that just kind of validation, or it's just that sense of comfort. And it's a quick fix. It's a quick way to feel good. And yeah, I think there can be this level of like promiscuity that happens after any type of trauma. It's so interesting, like all the different ways that people can try to cope with pain, really, is what it is. So, yeah. Jennifer says, okay, real quick about the CPTSD, then we'll go to your job. She said, I wonder if the hypersexuality in regards to CPTSD is the case if the victim was sexually abused or assaulted. Maybe that's why some feel this way and others don't. I think that could very well be. I think sometimes for people too, sex is a way to control the situation, especially if there has been sexual abuse going on. So they might feel like, before I didn't have control over my own body. I was assaulted. This happened to me. And so now, because people tend to go either like one of two ways with that kind of stuff, right? So they either totally shut down and retreat. They don't date. They're not sexual. They might wear really baggy clothes. They might gain a lot of weight. They might just kind of quit leaving the house. They might really withdraw, or they might become hypersexual. But they might be the aggressor. So they might be the ones continually seeking out partners. And it's not for validation. It's not for a sense of like, even it's like safety or security. It's that sense of them trying to regain control. So it's sort of like kind of reclaiming their sexuality, if that makes sense. And yes, that's very common for people to act in those two kind of extreme ways. And Kevin says, yeah, and ironically, the sexual urges keep us being lonely. It's a vicious cycle. So, yeah, I think when, it's the true intimacy that I think so many of us are looking for, and like that true level of attachment. And that's, I think, why casual sex like that can feel so empty. It's just like, oh, there's just no connection here. Like, I guess it was okay on some level, but it can leave a person feeling even emptier and lonelier than before. Let's Be Real says, I need some advice. Every doctor I go to doesn't know what CPTSD is, and they never even seem to bother with me. Honestly, they just ask my medical background, medication, etc. It's lame of the mental health business. Yeah, CPTSD, it's not something that's in the DSM, which is the book that they would get, like official diagnoses are in that book. So PTSD is kind of the catch-all. So for trauma-related things, but for any mental health professional to like truly, we're just at a very interesting stage, frustrating stage for those of us that are here. We're just kind of on like the crest of this. I think that really truly the mental health community understanding more hidden forms of abuse, like verbal, emotional, psychological. even physical abuse, physical sexual abuse, is still, I feel like it just scratches the surface of it. The level of understanding is just not as widespread as it really needs to be. And that's a big problem. So, and that's even for just women. Okay. So for like a woman going to a mental health professional, like their understanding of overt forms of abuse, like physical or sexual, that could still be a total crapshoot. Emotional, psychological, verbal, that may totally fly under the radar for a woman. For a man, I think it's 100 times more difficult to I think it's just not on the radar of too many mental health professionals. It's just kind of this stigma of like, this can't happen to men. And I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just, again, we're just on that like crest of understanding. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of men out there that have gone through all kinds of things, right? Because there are people too. Like these things happen to people. And yeah, it can be really frustrating and invalidating and exhausting. So I would say, here's kind of my take on it is, because it can be so difficult to find somebody that truly understands this stuff to the level that you need. It can be really helpful. This is just my opinion. If you have insurance, it can be helpful to possibly call ahead of time and say, like, I'm really struggling with emotional and psychological abuse, and this is what I went through. Is this something that you feel, and potentially PTSD, is this something that you feel equipped to handle? Asking that like upfront before you waste your time with the whole like intake assessment and everything else. So, and you might have to go to a handful of different people to find some that are a good fit. So that would be that. If you're just not getting anywhere, there's quite a few life coaches that are, I feel, very well versed on this topic. That, I think Angie Atkinson is fantastic. I'm trying to think of who else. There was a gal, and I'd have to dig up. Jackie is her name. She's a life coach. I don't know if she has a YouTube channel or not, but she's very well versed in this. I think she does. I'll have to get some information. But what I like about that is you can watch a person's videos and you can see if like what they know. So I feel it's just kind of expedites the process with all of this. But I will say too, here's the other challenge with trauma, especially. Mental health is in general is every person is so different, and trying to really gauge where a person is and what to say and what not to say. And it can feel like on a mental health professional side, it feels like you're trying to disable a bomb, because you're just really carefully going through the wires and talking to people. And you might say one thing to one person, kind of like what we were talking about earlier with, different people are at different stages in their healing and understanding. And you could say one thing to one person and they're like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I needed to hear. Where another person might feel incredibly invalidated and hurt. And that one thing just totally shuts them down. And that, I will tell you, that is a terrible feeling. Yesterday, on Angie's channel, we had our live stream and I had made a comment. I've been thinking I need to go post a comment on there, because I just keep thinking about this, because this is my biggest fear of like saying something that sets another person back on their healing. Like that's the last thing that I want to do. So there was two situations there. There was a woman whose, I don't know if it was her husband or boyfriend, there was a situation, and it was child abuse. And I became very reactive about it. And I was like, you got to leave the house. Like, this is child abuse. This is a big deal. And then there was another gal that was on her way to a shelter. And again, like I was very reactive and very pushy with my approach to things. And then after, like shortly after I was saying these things, and then for sure after the live stream, and then pretty much, I'm still thinking about it. And I've thought about it probably 100 times since then, of like, Dana, this like that could have spiraled either one of the, or both of those women into feeling like massive amounts of shame and embarrassment. And this could have been like their one time to reach out. Like, you just don't know how fragile some people are. And my response was not okay. So it's I guess just so from the other side here, it's just, it can be incredibly difficult. It's just a hard line to walk, even if you do know about a lot of this stuff. So. Okay, Catherine is talking about sexuality in her relationship. And she says, I'm in a highly suspicious, covert, somatic, narcissistic, long-term relationship, and it's subtle disrespect that I notice. Yeah, well, if you're in a relationship with a person that you feel is a covert, somatic narcissist, I mean, right there, you know what I mean? Like that alone isn't going to work. So let alone the disrespect is a problem too. But if you're feeling like this person is kind of more, this is like ongoing behavior, then, and if it's long distance, like, are they faithful? If we're talking a narcissist in general, they're probably not. If we're talking a somatic narcissist, I would say it's almost definite that they're not. Kevin's talking about the EMDR. He says that eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is a form of psychotherapy in which the person being treated is asked to recall distressing images while generating one type of bilateral sensory input, such as side-to-side eye movements or hand tapping. I don't get how that is supposed to help reprocess the trauma. I don't fully understand it either. And here's my 2 cents on it is, well, let me tell you what I've read on it, and then I'll give you my 2 cents on it. I've read that EFT, like the tapping therapy, as well as EMDR, it's almost kind of along the same equivalent of like acupuncture for your body. So like there's these different meridians, and that certain things just kind of get trapped in these different meridians. And if you open them up, then they're released. It sounds kind of far out there. Lots of people have had lots of success with this. My guess is, and that could be it. Like that just could be a very valid like form of science that I'm just not that familiar with. And, and then that's just it. I really feel that what makes EFT and EMDR so powerful is it helps to get that locus of control. It gives a person control back because you're going through and you're actually doing something. I think a lot of therapy, the reason it feels good to go, but it's not effective, is that it falls under that umbrella of like venting. So in some ways that venting, that perpetual vent, if a person's just, and therapy shouldn't be venting, but if a person is just going into therapy and they're venting about things, there's no forward momentum that's happening. And it's just kind of like mental masturbation. So it's confusing like activity and productivity with, actually having the homework, with having concrete things a person can do. It helps them regain their control. And it's like, And it gets rid of a lot of that learned helplessness of like, yes, you can move forward. So I would guess that having a person imagine or visualize, different trauma or holding on to a different emotion, then going through these steps, it just gives them their control back. And that's a big part of like why there's a lot of that energy that's discharged after they do that. Because I think so much of that energy has nowhere to go. If a person has these feelings of learned helplessness and that their power is outside of themselves, that energy, it just creates anxiety. That energy has nowhere to go. But if you can give it a channel to flow out of you into something constructive or productive, that energy begins to dissipate. I could be way off base on that, but that's my 2 cents. Let's see here. And maybe that's true. Life Alchemistic says, I've had acupuncture and could feel the energy move through the meridians. I believe in the efficacy of these points too. And if you believe in it, it likely makes the treatment effective for you. Well, I think that's also a very valid point. Even if let's just say that there's no science behind it, there's nothing. The placebo effect is very, very real. A person's belief in something is oftentimes all that's needed for healing to happen. There's been studies done, for example, with the drug Prozac, and they have found that the placebo effect with Prozac is much higher than the actual effectiveness of Prozac. And Prozac is one of the top prescribed antidepressants. So, and they've done things like, there was one video I was watching about, I don't even know if like when this was done, because I don't think this would be ethical, but that they did like knee surgery on somebody that was reporting like there's some sort of like torn ligament or something. And they were going to do exploratory knee surgery, and they didn't do anything. They went in like laparoscopically, I guess, but they didn't do anything. But I think they told the person that they had, and then like the person, because something happened, then they, felt better. So I don't know. The brain is an interesting thing. And yeah, I could see how a lot of that. But I will say though, I've been to acupuncture, 2 or 3 times, but it's been years. The first time I went, I had no expectations. I did not think I had negative expectations. I didn't think it would work at all. It was a last kind of ditch effort. And I left feeling like I was drunk. So it was really weird. And maybe it was because it hurt and I was in pain for I don't even know how long they left the needles in, like a while, like 20 minutes or so. I was in a kind of low grade level of pain. So maybe it was that feeling of drunk wasn't necessarily the anything moving through my meridians. It was more of like, I had all this adrenaline going through my system for a very prolonged period of time. And then it stopped. So then it was just that kind of like just that drop, I don't know. And I would agree with that too. Let's Be Real says, I think a lot of times meds hold people back and it can reinforce mental illness. It's amazing what people can steer into. And I agree with you. I think there's I think this is such a challenge with mental health because it's easy and understandable for a person to steer into something. So if I remember when I first heard the words, when I was first diagnosed with PTSD, I just felt like my world ended. I felt like that was the proof of like, yes, I truly am broken. I was just devastated. I mean, that diagnosis almost drove me to suicide. It was such a low point for me. And horribly depressing, and then feeling like when you go to see a therapist or when you go to the doctor, you just don't feel like a normal person. You feel like I'm the broken person that's here to get help. And everybody else is a functional adult except for me. It's a terrible thing. And when I was working at community mental health, I felt very much the same way with a lot of our patients. And there's this understanding and this stigma of what mental personality disorders or mental illness is. I had one nurse who she was such a sweetheart. She had been a nurse. I think she just retired a few years ago. She's been a nurse for like 50 years and just was a bottomless well of like compassion. She just was so good at her job. Anyways, on her office door, she had this sheet with all of the famous people and different things that they struggled with. So like she had like Tom Cruise, who is dyslexic, different writers and painters who were diagnosed with like bipolar or schizophrenia, or just famous people that we never maybe realized, like, oh, they're human too. They have things too. So, and then you don't feel so alone in that. And you realize not only that, but then you realize that you're not profoundly broken, that like you can still move forward and have a really great life if you can get the treatment that you need. And and then you have to kind of like redefine yourself. Like, what does this really mean to live with PTSD? What does this really mean for a person to have schizophrenia? And for them to define themselves and to get rid of all of the scary stigma surrounding like certain different disorders. So, but yeah, I think when a person here, because I noticed this especially with borderline personality disorder, and I think this is the danger, frankly, with any cluster B personality disorders, borderline, histrionic, antisocial, and narcissist. And this is the reason narcissists and a good therapist or psychiatrist or any diagnosing mental health professional, they're only going to tell a person a diagnosis if it's in the client's best good. There's no reason to tell a person that they have narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder. A responsible therapist isn't going to tell somebody that, because then what that person's going to do is then they're going to probably read up on it, and then they're going to become more of that. Once they realize that they have a lower degree of empathy, that with basically non-existent remorse, they're manipulative, they're this, they're that, they're the other, they're going to wear that like, they're going to cloak themselves in it. And it's not even, and not only is it not conducive to them, it's not conducive to their health or healing, because then they self-impose these limits about what they're capable of. It's like, oh, well, you said I'm a narcissist. Well, now there's nothing I can do to change. Right. And then they just feel more entitled to act the way that they do. The only personality disorder in the cluster B category that's openly discussed with people is borderline personality disorder, because there are treatments out there for it. But again, I will still tell you, I don't think I've ever come across a person that's been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder that it hasn't made their behavior worse, at least for like the first probably 6 months. They steer into it because they're like, oh, well, I guess I'm, have really impulsive moods, and I have really, erratic behavior and, kind of difficulty with interpersonal relationships. And they just become more of that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy until they can learn to modulate their behavior better. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of, I think it would be more beneficial to talk about, especially for cluster B stuff, to talk about it in terms of traits, not personality, not so concrete of like, you have this personality disorder, right? Like that's so heavy. If you talk about it more in terms of traits, like these are the specifics, some things that I think would really radically improve your life. Like you can control it. It's more of a bringing it to your awareness and like learning how to moderate your emotions. But yeah. Blue Moon asks, Dana, does a therapist have to disclose a diagnosis if a patient asks what they have? That's a great question. As far as I'm aware of, like a client can ask for their file, and probably depending on the state that they could get a copy of it. So, but I think here's another thing for people to consider too, is a big part of diagnosing is about insurance reimbursement. So, and it's not saying that like mental health professionals are greedy or any of that, and they have to be able to justify, they have to come up with a treatment plan, and they have to be able to justify that treatment plan. And that's where diagnosis codes come into play. That's where the DSM comes into play. So if a person, let's say if you were to call your therapist and let's say they did give you copies of it, or a psychiatrist, they were to give you copies of everything, right? A person could look at that and be like, oh my goodness, I'm sicker than I thought. I have generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, PTSD, borderline personality disorder. The list goes on and on and on. Sometimes what clinicians will do is they will put a handful of different diagnosis codes on there because insurance, the way that insurance reimburses, it might not reimburse for certain codes, but it will for other codes. We encountered this all of the time. So we would throw out as many diagnosis codes that we felt could pertain. So like, for example, with our former patients, we had a lot of people that were on government assistance, right? So they didn't have the funds to pay for things. The codes that were used were oftentimes used to help cover medication for their insurance and to cover lab work that was needing to be done. So they might have had 6 or 7 diagnosis codes, but if they were to ever see, I could imagine that a person would just feel like really messed up if they were to see all that. And it's a way to kind of catalog what's going on with another person. And it's more so for a way for mental health professionals to be able to talk to each other. So if you're working on a treatment team and you have different diagnosis codes, it's a shortcut way to kind of understand what you can expect. Does that make sense? So a person, and there's just so much to it. And I'm just a big fan of, from like a non-insurance level, or even treatment plan level, like you define you. And you figure out, don't ever let anyone else define you and like what you're capable of or any of that. Like this goes back to like taking that power and putting it back inside of ourselves. So, these diagnoses it's a cluster of behaviors and, or a cluster of symptoms. And I'm a big fan of if a person has that driving desire or ability to move forward and work on themselves, then go for it. Let's Be Real says, why don't narcissists ever get physical? Is it because they know that they would get into trouble? Oh, I think a lot of them do. I think Maya B says, narcissists are abusive. All domestic abusers are narcissists. I would say the vast majority of them are. Yeah. It's either untreated mental illness. It's either, addictions, like meth, stuff that causes, or alcohol that just exacerbates issues that a person already has, or it's a personality disorder. So normal people don't have such extreme behavior that they cause PTSD in other people. Like that's extreme. So, okay. And New Chris says, abuse always gets worse if you stick around. Yes. Okay, let's see here. Okay, scrolling up here. Yeah, I like that, Jacqueline. That's a great comment. It says she's talking to a member here who says, whose name is Free the Puppies, who says, you're not broken, you're healing. The proof is that you're here and you're finding out how to heal and move forward. Yes, I think that's such a key point. Like we might feel really badly bruised, but we're not broken. And even if you do feel, you're like, no, I really feel broken. That's okay too. But if you're feeling broken, realize that we can reassemble the pieces. Like there is life after this. It might not feel like it right now, but it is possible. And we talk about this all the time, but I think one of the biggest things to realize too with healing is realizing that healing doesn't mean going back to the way things were. Like you won't go back to the old you. But I know that can really seem depressing and discouraging, but please realize when we move forward, it's like getting a cut on your arm. The skin that heals itself isn't the same skin that was there before. It might be scar tissue, but the beauty in that scar tissue is it's stronger than the skin that was there before. And there's a psychological term called resiliency. And so when we start recovering from this, we develop this, and resiliency is a lot like a muscle. The more you go through, the stronger you become. So healing isn't about returning to the way you were. It's about moving forward into a much more empowered, new chapter, kind of new you. And yes, you're going to understand the world in a different way. You're going to understand yourself in a different way. You're going to have some challenges that you might not have been aware of, or that might feel really strange, such as like feeling really distrustful of other people. That's a big one, a very common one, where you're like, okay, I just feel differently around other people. And why can't I be like the old me? Or why can't I be like everybody else? Everybody else just seems to trust people, take them at face value. They rush into things and all of this. And it can make us feel broken if we can't do the same. But the thing is with that was never healthy to begin with. It just never, like backfired on anybody before. If they had gone through what we had gone through, they would feel the exact same way. They'd feel very distrusting and, guarded and all of these things. So the fact that if you are struggling with this, if you're feeling this way, we just have to learn how to, realize like trust is something that's earned. It's not something that's so freely given, and that you're just going to be going about cultivating different boundaries and standards and deal breakers. That life is going to be different, but that's not to say that life can't even be better than before, which I know might sound really wild, but you can start moving forward. I mean, I've talked about this before. Like the benefit of having your whole life blown apart is that when you go to reassemble the pieces, you get to decide piece by piece what you want in your life. And that's really powerful. Most people don't ever have that because unless they've had their life blown apart. This isn't something that a person willingly does, because who wants that, right? It's really painful and stressful and everything else. So there's a lot of good that we can squeeze out of this. So, okay, let's see here. Yeah, I agree. Bonnie says, she says, and poor Tina Turner was horribly abused, but she rose above it. I get goosebumps every time I think of her. She is just the epitome of just strength and grace and beauty and talent. I just absolutely adore that woman. And talk about a thriver. Look at where she is now. I mean, what a powerful story she has. And I think, too, it's also important to discuss, like when I was just talking about her grace and her gentleness. It's very easy for a person, and understandable for a person, to go through intense trauma and to become guarded and angry and bitter and shut down and jaded and all of these things. I totally get it. And it's a struggle for, I think, a lot of us to not slip into that. But I think that's one of these conscious decisions that we can make of, okay, I am going to define me. I'm not going to let this situation define me. And so I'm going to keep I'm just going to bring more light into the world. I'm going to bring forth compassion and goodness and joy and love and these things in a healthy, safe way. And like I was reading that quote at the beginning of the live stream about empathy. Let me read it again, because I think it's just I love what Laura had to say here. Laura says, the cool thing to know about empathy is that it requires you to experience it in order to have it. Empathy is not compassion, and it's not sympathy. Empathy is holding space with another and relating to whatever it may be that they are feeling, because you have felt that too. So my point is, in a way, you earn this wonderful, enlightened human superpower. You would not be able to empathize with someone in great pain if you had not felt great pain. So there's a lot of, I think, just goodness that we can choose to be like, I'm not going to let this harden me, because then this negativity, this evil of all of this wins. And I now have this heightened capacity for empathy, and I understand great pain. And I think that really truly, if there's ever going to be world peace, it's going to be due to tremendous amounts of pain that unify people, because there's just, you get it. You know what I mean? Like, you truly understand the humanity and other people. And it's the only thing that I really feel cuts through all of the other things that we get so preoccupied with, like religion and, I don't know, sexual orientation and nationality and skin color and all of the stuff that some people get tripped up in. And you see another person's pain and it's similar to your own. There's that understanding there. It unites the two of you. And it's powerful. So, okay. Yes, and that's a really great point, Jeffrey. He says, I think the way we trust changes. We see people for who they are inside more clearly, and we don't expect anything different of them. And yes, I agree completely. And there's such a level of freedom in that, and acceptance. And I would almost say a level of love and compassion that's present, because it's not, when we see them, we truly see them. We're not seeing the fantasy that we've created about them. And we're not falling into the fantasy that they're trying to sell us. And there's just this level of authenticity that's just, it's very rare, and to actually have that is just really, really powerful. And so then it helps too, because you see them for who they are. You're able, even if you do get caught up in that fantasy, you're able to see the fantasy for what it is and to get back into reality. And so if you do detach from them, it's much easier to detach in, detach in love, for lack of a better term. Like you just see it, like you're not as emotionally invested in them being something other than they are. Like you just see it. It's so much easier to have compassion. It's also a lot easier if you can detach a lot sooner than them getting their hooks in you and then dragging you through hell. But when you see it and you realize there's all kinds of reasons for people to be the way they are, it's just a lot easier to just realize what is for you and realize what is not for you, and to detach in peace. Yes. Oh, Malik says Tina Turner is really spiritual. I love her meditation chant. It's on YouTube. Yeah. So that was another thing with Tina Turner. She was, in many ways, a big inspiration for me spiritually, because she, after going through everything, she was in a tremendous amount of pain. And that was a big catalyst for her finding Buddhism. And she's from, unless something's different lately, but she's really big into Buddhism. And I don't know. I just think the world of her. I feel I should write her a fan letter and let her know that. Not that she, probably even reads them or anything, but I feel like, I don't know. I feel like that might need to be done. Let's see. Let's Be Real says, if you were abused by a narcissist or just abused in general, you see the world for what it is. And then Let's Be Real says, does anyone watch George Carlin? Yes, I love George Carlin. So I'll be curious to see where you're going with this. But let's go back and revisit this real quick. If you were abused by a narcissist or just abused in general, you see the world for what it is. I think we have to kind of be cautious with that, because sometimes we can see the world in kind of through a jaded lens of pain. And through pain and suffering of like, yeah, basically like life is crap and then you die. Right? Like it just can be a very harsh way to view reality. So, and I'm not saying that you were inferring that. Maybe you were, I don't know, but I guess I just wanted to be clear on that, that trauma can really change a person's perspective of the world. But I do think I'm just a big fan of making everything work for us, for our highest and greatest good, and for the highest and greatest good of others. Like what else is there? Really, what else is there? So with that, I think we just need to continually keep squeezing out everything we possibly can and really pay attention to how the meaning that we're making from different situations, and to really choose the most empowered meaning possible. Now, this isn't to say that a person's going to go from like a really painful, traumatic event to a really like empowered meaning, overnight, or even within a month. Like it might take a while for a person to get there. Like I said earlier, that empowered meaning part of it all can feel really, it can contribute to more feelings of like re-victimization and shame and depression early on. But I think if we just set that as a North Star of like, we're going to find the most empowered meaning possible, we're going to use this for our highest and greatest good and the highest and greatest good of others, it gives us a direction in which to head. It gives us a positive, empowered direction in which to head. Like if you feel like you're, it's like the saying goes, if you feel like you're walking through hell, you just keep walking. But it helps to know where you're walking to, because then it's easy to just keep walking through hell and you're just walking in circles. Because trauma can make a person, it can just feel like your whole world shrinks, and then your world is just a very small place and it's very painful. But if you have a really positive, empowered North Star, Now you have a direction. You might not know how to get there, but you just keep heading in that direction and you will eventually get there. Bonnie says, I am personally so done with narcissists and their flying monkeys. Yes, the North Star. I will dance to my own music now. Yes. Yes. Ooh. Gosh, timer. Well, thank you. Let's be real for the live stream donation and the heart. That's awesome. Thank you. Yes, and that Kiara, that's so true, says it's so hard to know who you can trust. When you meet people, you don't meet them, you meet their representative. And most people I meet flip the script so quickly when they get comfy. Yeah, a lot of people do. And this is another one of the many reasons why it's so important to go slow with meeting people, is because 9 times, not even that, probably 10 times out of 10, you are meeting their representative. Most people want to make a good impression, especially if there's some sort of like stakes involved, right? Like you're on a first date or a job interview or something like that, or they're trying to make a good impression. But yeah, I think just realizing that. I think all of us tend to put our best foot forward at first. And then over time, as we get more comfortable around them, we put in less effort and more of who we really are begins to come through. And yeah, and that can be very confusing when that happens. See, Blue Moon says, I came across a saying that I would like to share. I can choose to let it define me, confine me, refine me, or outshine me. Or I can choose to move on and leave it behind me. I like that. I like that. Great saying. Hi, Deborah. So, okay, we're getting ready to wrap up and do a guided meditation thing. Real quick, Con P says, is Dana still having her book club meetings? I am. Last Thursday of every month. So that will be the 25th of October is when that will be. 25th of October, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The book that we're going to be discussing this month is it's a Pia Melody book, Facing Codependency. So if you're interested in reading that book, I highly recommend. It's not available in ebook form, which I don't even know what to do. I read everything on ebook. So I had to order it from Amazon. It's taken forever to get here. So if you are interested in reading along, you might want to see if you can get it at your local library or buy the book online. Just a heads up. And just as a reminder, I am going to be Healthy Love is having an art show in New Hope, Pennsylvania. And I'm going to post the info. I will be there this weekend, Friday and Saturday. So Friday, October 12th, 6 to 9 p.m. Saturday, October 13th, 2 to 7 p.m. And details will be in the chat, but then also down below. So if you are in the area, if you're interested in seeing her amazing artwork, and I think it's just phenomenal, please stop by. I will be there. She will be there. It'd be nice to put some faces to some names. So let's see. Oh, tired, but not really. Been a long day. Okay. Okay, so I guess on that note, let's Oh, that'd be, Kevin, it would be seriously fantastic to finally meet you. So it would be cool. I hope we do get a chance to meet. Maddie asks, can this book be found at the local library? If the libraries are amazing these days, so you can call your local library and tell them the book that you're looking for, and they can generally order it from another library for there's no cost if they don't have it in. So and Pia Melody, I really am just such a big fan of all of her work. It might even be worth asking your local librarian if they could order, just like buy those books, because they're just, I think they're just so good like that they should just be in every library. So, okay. Oh, Sam, good. I'm glad that helped you, says Dana. Thanks for pointing out the difference between silent treatment and going no contact with the toxic person earlier on. Yes, you are so welcome. I know it's these little like subtle differences that can really trip a person up. But once you see the difference, it's like, oh, now I can move forward. And if there's any kind of guilt or confusion, like that's gone. So really, I am shocked. Missouri Cowboy says, I listened to a YouTube video of Alanis Morissette interviewing Pia Melody. He says, I found it excellent. Alanis is also such an inspiration. That sounds like a weird dream. How I'm going to have to like go look that up. Oh, really? Alanis Morissette. I know she's been through her own stuff, but I would not have ever guessed in a million years. I've got to write this down, that she would have interviewed Pia Melody. Pia Melody. Huh. I didn't realize she had a channel either. My goodness. Let's learn all kinds of stuff. Let's Be Real says, can I do a Skype session with you or someone who is battling narcissism or survived CPTSD? I don't do, this is basically all the live stream stuff that I do, but I'm here every Wednesday night. And then Angie and I also have our live stream. And then I'm in the Facebook group more so than my website group. But the website, and in both places, you're going to find a ton of people that are struggling with both of those two things. Let me think about, or I guess, could you if there's anything like specific that you want me to touch on, or, these kinds of things, like let me know, and I'll see what I can do. If there's certain points you want me to bring up, or, I think Angie, I'm trying to think of people that do Skype sessions. Let me chew on this for a little bit and see if I can kind of get a list of people that I feel have a really solid grasp on this topic. And I'm going to be driving all day tomorrow, and then I've got art show stuff, but let me make a note of it. Healthy Love, if you're still here, will you remind me of this? I will post it, and I'll come up with a few names. Okay. And then I'll post it in the comments on the video in like the next few days. So, and we'll go from there. Okay. But if you, like I said, if you have any specific topics that you want me to bring up just in like a general live stream, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to do that. Okay. Okay. So let's, do some let's take a moment. We'll end with our guided meditation and relaxation thing. So let's take a moment. If you are in a place where you can be fully present. Oh my gosh. Whether you're sitting down or lying down, taking some time for yourself to be fully present in your body. Present in your body as well as in the present moment. So let's take a series of 7 breaths in through your nose and exhaling out through your mouth. With each breath in, allowing that oxygen to go deeper and deeper down into the bases of your lungs, filling up your stomach. Breathing deep, being fully present in your body and in this moment. Turning your attention inward and listening to your heartbeat. Now bringing your attention to the top of your forehead, releasing any tension that you might have, relaxing your eyebrows, relaxing your eyes, relaxing your cheeks and your jaw, allowing your jaw to fall open and your tongue to fall from the top of the mouth. Remembering to breathe. Relaxing your neck. Relaxing your shoulders, allowing them to drop down and fall back. Allowing your chest to expand and to be open. Realizing that in this moment that you are safe, that you are here, that you are fully present in your body. And continuing, moving down into your chest, your stomach, releasing any knots that might be in your stomach. Allowing those breaths to continue to go deeper and deeper down to the bases of your lungs and continuing to go further down into your stomach, past your stomach, down into your hips, where you can feel your complete torso rising and falling with each breath. And now relaxing your hips and unclenching any muscles in your back. And allowing your legs to fall into whatever position is the most comfortable for you. Relaxing your thighs, and your calves, and your feet, and your toes. Wiggling your toes as you just let them relax. Relaxing your hands, allowing them to fall into whatever position is the most comfortable for you. Now let's visualize the flicker of a small light inside of you. It's a beautiful white light. It's your inner essence. It's something that we all have. You never lose it. It's always there. Perhaps it's the size of a flame on a candle. And you see it as it's flickering inside of you. It's peaceful, it's pure, it's good. Now with each breath in, visualize each breath in, breathing in everything that is good and right. Just this acknowledgement of everything that is good and right with your life right now, that is good and right in the world. Or even just a simple acknowledgement that there is goodness out there. Breathing that in, and as you breathe it in, it fans that light and it starts to expand. Making that light grow bigger and bigger. As you exhale, exhaling any pain or stress, tension or anxiety. Inhaling the good and exhaling the tension. And watching that light grow larger and larger. For some of you, it might feel like that your chest is very closed off, that it feels almost like a series of bricks in your chest. And so visualizing this light might seem kind of difficult. And if that's the case, I'd like for you to see if you can get the light big enough to where it starts to crack those bricks and shine through. Remember, this light is always there. There are so many things that are right about you, that are right about your life in this very moment. Even if it doesn't feel like it, there still are so many things that are good and right about you. And there's still so many things that are good and right in this world. And just connecting to that energy in a very safe, secure way. And allowing that light to grow bigger and bigger. And visualizing perhaps different people in the chat. Visualizing them doing this exercise right now. And sending out some of your light, just reconnecting with them in an energetic way. Just sending light and love to them and letting them know that they are not alone and reassuring yourself that you are not alone. Just connecting to everything that is good and right. Let's do that for the next 7 breaths. When you're ready, come on back, open your eyes, Perhaps take some time to just give yourself a big energetic hug, just acknowledging that there is so much that is right with you, and that you matter, and that you're doing a great job. So thank you guys so much for being here. I think that's a great idea. Let's be real. And said, I'd like to see a 24-hour CPTSD line. Yeah, that's very cool. Well, then we have to brainstorm how something like that could even happen. Because I agree. I feel like there's such a need for it that a hotline would really be fantastic. And I would love to see it be free, like a suicide hotline is. So, okay. Thank you guys so much. If you're going to be in and around New Jersey, or sorry, Pennsylvania, please come by and say hi. So details, I'm going to post them one more time in the chat, and then I'll post them down below in a few hours. So lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will talk to you soon. Okay? Good night.